Good morning, CSL Palm Desert and beyond. How are you this morning? It's a beautiful morning here in the desert. It is Monday, December 7th. Can you believe we're already through the first week of December? For those of you who live in the Riverside County area or Southern California area, we're under a new lockdown. So I feel like we're back to the extended snow days that we had, or we thought we were having back in April. So I'm glad you're joining us today. Today I want to wrap up my talk that I did last week. I was almost done with the resentment issues. I got a couple more slides I wanted to show you. And then we're going to go into, is your image of God up to date? And I can tell you that I've been grappling with that myself the past few weeks. So it should be an interesting class. I'm glad you're here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Let's get started. So Krista, bring up the first slide from last week. All right. This is the one that I felt has been most poignant to this entire year. Everyone has a God-given right to think as they choose. You may not agree, but that's not up to you. It's true. Everybody has a right to their own choices, their own, the way they treat other people. And I may not agree with it, but I can't do anything about it because it's their life. It's my life. If I've made choices in my life to live my life a certain way, then I just don't think people have the right to come in and tell me that, I need to change that. Now, I always believe that when we do the right thing, in fact, in our philosophy, we talk about if you don't, take something from someone else, if you don't get your good by walking over someone else or stealing it, it has to be spiritually sound. So I try my personal guidepost here is to make sure that I'm doing the right thing so that I'm not harming other people or taking something away from someone else. So there you go. Next slide, please. This one I like too. Jesus was too busy doing his work to judge others or care about how they judged him. Life is too short to worry about what people are thinking about you. Jesus was too busy when he was doing his work. He just didn't care what other people thought about him. What he did, he just knew what was right is right. Right needed to prevail, and he would walk in that righteous place, that right useness. I've always liked the word righteousness, and someone broke it down with me one time that said if you say it the right way, it's right. Righteousness is right useness, right using rightly the laws that we have, the spiritual components that we have to work with. So I like that idea. So he was too busy doing the work to judge other people or allow people to judge him. So what if we just, like I said last week, one of the last things I said was stop trying to analyze other people. We will never understand what drives other people. We can only understand what drives us. And so subsequent to that, we just can't really allow ourselves to get bogged down in what other people are thinking. We just have to say, this is mine. I own this. I'm taking responsibility for my life. I'm taking with the way I act, what I do, what I don't do. We just have to wrap our arms around it as best we can. All right, next one, please. False judgment. False judgment under resentment creates a series of lies. I'm not going to read from the book because I could just capsulate it right here. False judgment under resentment creates a series of lies. When we're resenting someone and we're operating on the level of anger or being upset with someone, our mind tends to make up stories that will support our anger. In the absence, again, we know this, in the absence of truth, the mind will make up a story. And so false judgment under resentment, because when we're resenting someone, we're actually using the negative use of the law. It begins to create a series of lies within our head about the individual, about the circumstance. And as soon as we understand that we should not, and I don't want to should on somebody, but we should step back long enough to realize that this judgment that we're taking on is based on the anger and the resentment and the hostility or whatever the emotion is, the negative emotion. Once we trigger that idea, then it opens up a whole new world of discussion in our head, a whole new debate within our head about how to actually talk about this. I recommended recently the 4 agreements, back to the 4 agreements. I know I keep going back to some original text material, but it's just timeless. This stuff is just as timeless as could be. So going back to the 4 agreements about being impeccable with your word, and do your words harm or do they help? And making sure that when we're talking about things in our life and talking about them, especially with other people, that we're not harming other people, that we are just speaking our truth in a way that comes from a place of love and forgiveness, and not the anger and places of being anxious. That anxiety place does not operate well into our consciousness. All right, next one, please. If resentment enters the mind, think twice before you let it lodge there. You know what? Don't give residency to the anger. Many times we do. We say, I am. The words I am are extremely powerful. When we use the words I am, it is declaring into the universal law that which we are ready to experience more of, that we take ownership of. So when you say, I am angry, I am sick, I am tired, the universe says, boop, there you go. Let it lodge there. You're giving it an address. Its address is, Joe Hooper's mind and Joe Hooper's body. So when we say those things, we have to be very cognizant that when the idea of resentment or being upset, it enters our minds, we have to think twice before we acknowledge it and say, yes, this is who I am. Now, many times we want to say that because we want to process what we're going through. We want to have time to feel the emotions that we feel around certain subject matters. And I would say that's a valid thing to do. It's a valid thing to want to do that. So why don't you give yourself a little bit of time and say, I'm going to temporarily look at this. I'm just going to give it a few minutes instead of days or weeks. And some people I know even years. Give it just a little bit. Allow yourself the ability to feel what you want to feel, with the idea knowing that it's temporary and now I want to move into something more, and just start doing that. That's the way you do it. All right, next thing, please. Conclusion, bottom page 57. I do want to read this because it's pretty good. All right. People are wondering, despite all their faults, they are the color and joy of living. People are wonderful. We don't appreciate enough of warmth of knowing, working and living with people. The divine wisdom created them that we should have a mutual understanding, mutual affection, mutual goals. That is why the religions of the world have taught the idea of oneness of mankind. Excuse me. The reasons for our bickerings are so minor, and the reasons for our mutual cooperation are so great. The dream of peace on earth and goodwill toward all is the God potential in each person. One day this shall be, for we shall see the stupidity of our own self-erected barriers of resentment, non-trust, and ill will. He's pretty good, isn't he? I love what he says. There is glory in living with so many. There is the joy of good fellowship. People are God's greatest creations. They are your easiest means for giving and receiving love. Anything that lessens this ability should be erased. The purpose of abolition is growth, not through lessons to be learned, but through triumphs to be achieved and joys to be experienced. Science has gradually destroyed the limitations which prevented us from living fully. With all of science's advances, we cannot remain small-minded people. We must move with science to the larger plan of life. Kind of timely. In you is the love of God and the greatness of being. I love that. In you is the love of God and the greatness of being. Your ways of thinking determine how much life can be yours. Letting go of the little, we can assume the great. Letting go of resentment, we can be the greater person that God planned. There is no power arrayed against us. God is the only real power and the only real presence, and all of God acts in our minds. In the long run, we can afford not to resent, for the goal ahead is more important than the impediments along the way. Our hurts are excess baggage which we carry. They need to be thrown away that we may travel far while traveling light. Isn't that brilliant? I love this stuff. I love that. Okay, so let me just recap this. Whenever we're holding on to the resentments and the smaller things of life, we're missing the bigger picture of our life. When we hold on to anger and disagreements, when we hold on to them, when we just refuse to release them, let them go and be, released into the ethers of which they all started. When we refuse to do that, we're allowing ourselves to contract and actually withdraw from the greater picture of life. So I love when he says this: when we remove those petty things, the biggest pictures begin to appear before us. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think if I look back in my life, and maybe you look back in your life, there were times when I was very resentful about something. And as soon as I got over that resentment and anger, other avenues of happiness began to open. Now, they didn't open when I was feeling those emotions, when I was tending to that pain. They didn't open, but the opportunity always exists for you to release, let go, and embrace whatever is next. And I tell you what, it's a real thrilling idea when you learn the techniques on how to release and let go and how to replace it with something that's new and exciting and growth, and it will evolve you into a more accepted, loving human being with yourself. When we get to that place, when we get to that corner of our life where we need to make that turn, then when we leave that one thing behind us, it just throws us down a whole new road of opportunity. So when we get to that fork in the road, choose forgiveness, choose to be released from the bondage of all those ideas so that we can embrace something greater. All right. So let's move on to the next chapter. The next chapter is called the Divine Intangible. And that Divine Intangible is actually just another name of saying, the God, right? The Divine Intangible. What is God? So I had them talk about, is your idea of God up to date? So let's go to the next one. All right. Krista, next slide. There we go. All that makes life worth living. Here we are. Wait a minute. Where do we go? I have a different start. All that makes life worthy is intangible. Oh, well, that's okay. We'll go for here. Life, love, mind, beauty, joy, and even God are intangibles. It's not a 5 sense experience. So when we start talking about God, all of God, it's not the intangible stuff. I mean, all of life is the worthwhile is intangible. It's not the 5 sense experience. It's those attributes: love, mind, life, beauty, joy, and even God. They're the ones that is the creative force. That's the creative element that allows us to experience life in its fullest. When we only look at the 5 sense experience, sight, touch, smell, when we only look at those things to satisfy us, we may be slighting ourselves of the larger picture of something. All right. Next slide, please. All right. No one has ever loved or been loved too much. I love that picture. No one has ever loved or been loved too much. This is the case. There's never a chance. There's never an opportunity for us not to love more, not to give of ourselves, not to be of service to other people. No one has ever been loved. You can't ever. I don't think I've ever said in my life, "Oh, I have enough love. I'm okay. I don't need any more. I'm good." Let's not put ourselves in that situation. Let's know that we are open to love, that we are open to the ideas of love. All right. Next one, please. Definitions of God are not complete. There's always more to be known. And isn't that the truth? Are you ready? Definitions of God are never complete. And the reason I say that is because as soon as we start trying to identify and give labels to what we believe God or this energy to be, there's always something bigger to be found. Maybe on your own personal journey, you'll understand this, that, when I was a kid, I thought of God in a certain way. And then I was a teen, I thought of God in a certain way. And then as I get older and older and older and to get to different phases of my life, I begin to view God a totally different way. All right. So I look at it very differently now because there's more to be experienced. And God isn't a thing out there. God is within us, and it's an energy, and it's a force that allows us to live our lives to the fullest. And when we tap into that energy, a greater sense of that energy, a greater sense of who we're meant to be, when we tap into that, there is no place where we can't go. There is no place. So that the God within us begins to magnify and support and guide us into the greater. That's what I want to believe. So in my mind, my identification or definition of God is never complete. It's not going to ever be stagnant because I'm not stagnant. If I'm growing, my idea of God is growing. Does that make sense? All right. Next one, please. Page 59, bottom of the paragraph, page 2. Here we go. Life is far too well organized to have created itself. Here we go. God is the creative mind as a cosmic necessity. Life is far too well organized to have created itself. With all the ability, we cannot create half as well as the infinite planner does. No one has ever seen God. We have seen people who acted the way they thought God must act. And these people have names. We call them saviors, saints, and messiahs. Some call them angels. Sometimes I call them my friends. Their minds, hearts, and accomplishments were symbols of humankind's own inner possibilities. Love that. Keep it going. Next slide, please. The image of God on the throne is easy to toss, but what do you replace it with? So, all right. So here we go. This is, when I was a kid, this is how I thought God looked. That picture right there. Do you see that picture? Krista, focus in on that picture for me. That's how I pictured God to look. There was a chair. Now, the only thing that's missing on that is a clipboard, right? But I always figured that there was going to have this God was going to be on a throne, and the image to toss that toss. I can get rid of that idea, but what do I replace it with? That's always been the challenge that I've had. When I was a kid, what do you replace it with? Because I was born with the punishing God, and I was born with the judging God, and I was, we were all born in those, and our friends that took us to their churches, and our relatives that followed a different faith tradition and how they shared it with us. It all stems from this idea for many of us that this God was this all-controlling thing from this chair. So once we toss that, how do we replace it? Next slide, please. Most people, it's hard to comprehend a God without personality. It's really, okay. So in this process of COVID and the past, what feels like 10 years, but it's only been 10 months, it's hard to comprehend a God without personality, because many times we think of this as it's the only way we can relate to things is if it has some type of personality to it. And how do I say this? It's hard to comprehend this energy not having any personal qualities, because those are the things we can identify with. That's how we label things. That's how our perception works. But when we realize that it doesn't have human qualities, rather it has these attributes that are unconditional in their existence, when we move into that awareness, then it doesn't have a personality. It just has an energy and what I want to call a desire. I'm kind of moving back and forth because I get this energy. It has this propulsion to want to create good by means of us and experience good by means of us. So I can't give it a personality, because as soon as I give it a personality, then it can take on the traits of a man or a woman or whatever it is. And it's not like that. It is all embodying. It's too big for that. All right. Next one, please. Page 69 or page 60, last paragraph. All right, here we go. The older religions had to teach a material concept of God, as the people in those days could not comprehend a power that acted without personality. Their religion had to supply them with a God which could be understood with their five sense thinking. Later religions kept this God made in the image and after the likeness of humankind, but for their followers who were emancipating themselves from limited beliefs, they added this philosophical intangible concept. This second theological premise was accepted by the enlightened and spiritually daring because they perceived a universal creative spiritual process in everything. Most religions of recent centuries have included both systems of thought. Many of the readers of this book will realize that through the years, they have accepted both ideas at the same time and not realized it. Okay, so we went from having this material idea, which when I started to break it down a little bit, when I went to Catholic high school, the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, right? There was the concept of the Father, which actually had a personality, which let's keep that conversation separate. There was this Father, this energy. There was the outpicturing of this Father, which we called the Son, and then there was this mysterious stuff called the spiritual, the Holy Spirit or the Holy Ghost, whatever you want to call it. And within that Trinity of that triune of Spirit lied the possibility that with that spiritual component, it added in an element that it doesn't have a personality, and because the Father and the Son had personalities because they were derivative of one and the other. But what created it was this spiritual stuff that was this big question mark. Like, you didn't see the Holy Ghost. You didn't talk to the Holy Ghost. In fact, the Holy Ghost didn't have a chapter in the Bible. It was just all about the experience of the human kind, not the spiritual kind. So, but it opened the door that a third of that triune was something that we could examine and get to know better and better, because it was a part of the outpicturing of the end result, which was known as the Son, which is the human body or the human form or whatever it is, the effect. Okay. So when we begin to allow ourselves to reframe the way we look at this old concept of God and the new concept of God, it allows us to venture into what I want to call that spiritual realm, because that was always there. And we've explored it deeper and deeper and more and become more defined. And it has a bigger part in what it plays in our life. All right. Next one, please. Most people want their traditional spiritual props. They never think to modernize their religious life the way they modernize their homes. So, yeah, let's talk about that. A lot of religions that we see out there are not necessarily keeping pace with the time. They say they're timeless, and yet as the world changes, they're not changing with the world. And subsequently, people are losing interest with that whole idea. If we don't update our religion, if we don't update the way we think about God, if I thought about God the way I thought about God in elementary school or high school or as a young adult, my life would look very different. I would feel very different about how things occurred in my life. But when I have the advantage of looking at how I have entered into an agreement with myself to expand my awareness and what it means to have this energy in my life, when that happens, the old ideas are tossed out. So people want their spiritual props. They want their crosses, and they want their stained glass windows, and they want their representations, because for some reason that brings them to a place. In fact, if you look at our sanctuary and you look around at what we do at the Science of Mind and the Center for Spiritual Living, especially in Palm Desert, we don't have any of those spiritual things hanging around. We don't have any props or symbols. What we do is we have the symbol of our teaching at the entry foyer, which is the symbol of the Science of Mind. But nowhere in the sanctuary do you see anything else. You don't see any insignias. You don't see any artwork that contains anything that would force someone to put their image of God into that picture. All right. So we don't use those things. We just modernize it by saying, as we commit to expanding our life, the universe expands by means of us, by teaching us more about this life. Okay, next one, please. They update their modern comforts, but not their 300-year-old traditions or beliefs. Raymond Charles Barker said this. They update the comforts of home. They update their plumbing and their bathrooms and their kitchens and we've updated our cars, but and the way we live from 300 years ago. But let's hold on to an idea that's 300 years old or more, right? Let's just sort of keep that as our guiding force, when really, maybe, just maybe, we need to start evolving with the evolution of life and the way things are moving, so that we can continue to support and sustain and guide people into a further expression of God as they get older and older with their lives. All right, as they move through their life. Next one, please. Hey, B, nice to see you. Oh, I hope you're enjoying Mexico. B, please logged in. B brought his logged in. Thank you. Good to hear from you. I miss seeing everybody. And you know what? But if you props give you, what is that? But if props, I can't, Jill, I don't understand that. I'm only seeing part of your comment. Oh yeah, okay. So if prop gives you comfort, that's okay. Yeah, if you have something, but make sure that the props don't become the focal point, because then you worship the prop, and you don't allow yourself to be free from that. So if you don't have your prop, you can't do it, right? Many people get accustomed to that. So let's talk about that before we dive into that. Many people take great comfort in their spiritual props, but in the absence of having that prop in front of them, they can't get to the place where they feel that. So they have to have it to get there. So just make sure you don't rely only on it to get you to that headspace. Because if you do, when that problem doesn't exist, in other words, if you have some sort of a spiritual practice that you do consistently, and you do it at home and it makes you feel connected, but you get into an emergency situation where you are, let's just say, God forbid, you're in a car accident and you're sitting there waiting for the rescue team. You don't have your prop to go to. You don't have your prop to hang on to. So you've got to go back in that head and just allow yourself to experience the overwhelming support of the universe, even though you don't have the prop to show it or to touch it at that moment. That's what I'm trying to get to. But thanks for the comments. Here we go. But it is, they're good as long as you don't rely on them consistently. You can't rely on them all the time to get you to that place. That's the danger that people have. Let me hang on, one more thing. That's a danger that people have when they get into our sanctuary. They actually feel like if they're not there, they can't get there in their minds. And so that place now represents the only place they can get to, that place of comfort and of solitude and of peace. And that's a dangerous thing, because like, look what we're going through right now. We haven't been able to enter into the sanctuary for quite some time, and it will be quite some time before we do that. And I don't want people to not experience peace and that feeling, even though it's harder to do online. I don't want people to not experience peace and that feeling because we're not able to meet up physically. All right. Next slide, Krista. Thank you. One primary idea: God is an infinite intelligence or mind in action through all creation, is particularly in us. Page 61, the last paragraph. Hang on, here we go. Modern religion has but one primary idea to present. It teaches that God is an infinite spiritual intelligence or mind in action through all creation, and particularly action in people. The creative power around us is an impersonal law, but in people it acts in a personal way. So let me unpack that. The creative power around people is an impersonal law, okay? But in people, it acts in a personal way. So in other words, the universe doesn't have this personal agenda. We create that. We create a personal agenda in our lives, okay? God personalizes and individualizes itself in humankind. This larger viewpoint will not appeal to those who need a God to justify their illnesses, bankruptcies, and trials. It will most certainly will not appeal to those who want an after-death heaven and hell. Many people cannot accept the law of cause and effect as a spiritual one because it makes them to do too much inner probing to find out the reasons for their failures. Ooh, take the next slide, because I think that's what it talks about. All right. Yeah. This will not appeal to those who need a God to justify their illnesses, bankruptcies, or trials. And certainly will not appeal to people who need a heaven or hell on the other side of life, on the other side of this life. This whole idea of this spiritual awakening will not appeal to people who need God, or actually need a devil or Satan or something on the opposite of the idea of good to justify where they got what they got. The law of cause and effect after that, if they can't accept the law of cause and effect, then many people just don't even want to look at it, because if I have to look at how I participated in a mess that I find myself in, when I have to look at that, then I have to look at my behavior and things I did. It's much easier to blame it on some spiritual devil or Satan, or you could call them your ex-husband, ex-wife, whatever. It's easier to blame it on other people than to take responsibility for your own actions. So in the search for a greater idea of what God is, don't use God to justify the things that have gone wrong. Look at your life and see how you were a participant in that. And also looking for God in an afterlife, looking for what's going to happen in the afterlife. No one knows. No one will ever know what goes on in life afterwards, right? You can read accounts for people go and come back, but really we have no concept of that. But is there, I know a lot of religions spend a lot of time working on getting enough points to get into this idea of what heaven is. And so while their time is spent here on earth, they're in hell because of their mindset, worrying about what's going to happen next. They fail to live the fuller life in this moment. They only live for what could possibly be on the other side, or to avoid what's on the other side because of their behavior. Think about it. That's an old concept. That needs to kind of go away. Next one, please. And I want to thank Krista, by the way. We have a young woman who helps us, who is just fantastic, who lines all this stuff up and sets me up and makes me look good. So Krista, I want to thank you, and Swing Point Media and Jeff Harrison. So if I don't forget that, I wanted to make sure I did that for you today. All right. Heaven and hell are symbols. The creative power within us doesn't know age nor circumstance. You can always create the life you desire. Is that true? It's true if you wanted to believe that it's true. You know, it's something that heaven and hell are symbols, and we move back and forth between those two symbols each and every day, don't we? There are moments when I am in pure heaven. There are moments when I think, oh my God, I'm in hell. What am I going to do? And what I love, this is real funny. Sometimes it only takes a moment for me to switch out from one place to the other. Now, lately, I've become a fan of TikTok. I know that I'm not supposed to do that, but I've become a fan of TikTok. And when I'm feeling kind of like down a little bit, I have to remind myself, just go to TikTok and watch some, animal do triple backflips and lick somebody's face or something. Watch something that brings joy, and it changes my hell to heaven almost instantly, right? And the creative power within us doesn't know anything about circumstance. It only knows to create the life we desire. And as soon as I take some sort of action to get out of my hell and put myself in a place of heaven, the universe complies. And I begin to feel lighter. I begin to feel like it's the right thing to do. All right? Next thing, please. Affirmation on page 62. Here we go. Here you go. Ready? You just close your eyes and just listen to the words if you like. I am forever a part of the living spirit. The creative power of God indwells me and acts through me. This word which I now declare is the law of perfect action. The full action of infinite mind now moves through my consciousness and accomplishes the desires of my heart. In me, God is my health, peace, love, and self-expression. In my world, God is order, harmony, and ever-expanding good. I recognize myself as the inlet and outlet of God, the one eternal mind. That's great. That's really great. I like that a lot. I like that. What I really like, in me, God is my health, peace, love, and self-expression. In my world, God is order, harmony, and ever-expanding good. And I recognize myself as the inlet and outlet of those things. That's powerful stuff. That's powerful stuff. If you think about that, that can move you to a different place today. The full action of infinite mind now moves through my consciousness and accomplishes the desires of my heart. Things may be a little bit messed up, and they are. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Things are just a little bit messed up and, continue to be a little bit messed up, but we can't allow the outward experience of what's happening in the world continue to run over our ideas of what possibilities exist in this next phase of life. We have to be aware of the balance and order that we can sustain right now. We can get it now. We can obtain it. We can sustain it. We can continue to guide it, and it will move us through greater things. All right, next one, please. Jill said, does it make you sad to think that when you die, you're just dead, not a spiritual afterlife or anything? Gosh, that makes me sad. Well, no, I don't believe that you are just dying dead. I think that you're actually have an energy that continues on. And I look at the people's lives that have made their transitions, how their energy just didn't die because they're living by means of me, right? There is only that, so it doesn't make me sad to think that. It makes me sad to think that my physical presence won't be here. But I do know that my energy, because energy has to go somewhere. The energy of life, it's the theory of relativity. All energy can't just dissipate. It has to go somewhere. So that vibration, that frequency, that energy will continue. And it does. And it continues among all the people, when you think about it, that lose lives you've touched and how you've created that. David Flint, one eternal mind. Absolutely. That's what we're operating in. We're all in that one eternal mind, living one eternal life. All right, here we go. The more you divorce yourself from limiting the creative power in action, the greater your achievements spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and materially. The more you separate yourself from limiting that creative power in action. Now, what separates us from that? All right, what does separate us from using this power for greater achievement? Usually, what separates us, for me, is my own self-doubt. It's saying, I don't think I could do that. I really don't want to embark upon that, because if I do that, oh my God, you know how much work that's going to be? And then there's going to be this and there's going to be that. And we start playing out the amount of sacrifice that would possibly have to be paid in order for us to have those achievements. So I talk myself out of my own good all the time, but through procrastination, through laziness, through taking the easiest way out, or relying on someone else to give me their opinion so that I can take that and I don't have to think it all the way through for myself. And that way, if it goes right, it's great. If it goes wrong, I can blame them. I mean, we have all of these ways that of divorcing ourselves from our own good. Now, the more we divorce ourselves from that, the more we separate ourselves from the greater life and achievement and happiness and emotional and physical and financial healings. So it's the double talk that we do for ourselves that puts us in jeopardy. It's the double talk that creates this idea that in our minds, we won't be able to experience those things. But the universe is always saying yes to us, as long as we're willing to do whatever it takes. It's not just a gift that arrives via FedEx on the front door. You have to do the work around it. All right, next one, please. God in all, everything, the lowliest of lows to the highest of highs. Each one of us falls somewhere on the scale. I remember we did a practice one time at one of my classes, and it was the lowest of low. And, we started talking about the amoeba of something and to the highest of high, which was, the total expression of the planets and all of the stars and all those things. Everything in between has God in all of it. And you've heard me say this before, and it's always worth repeating for new people. If you look at, do you remember in high school, or I guess it was high school, the periodic table of elements, that big chart in science room? I had in high school, Dr. Berkheimer, I'll never forget, had this huge, chart, and you had to memorize that chart because those were the purest of elements. That was what they've determined now that there's more of them. There used to be like 60 or 40, and now there's like 100 and something, because they keep discovering these pure elements that add to the chart. So, but what they have found is that every element that's on that chart, it somehow exists in some way, shape, or form in the human body. There's a couple they haven't confirmed, and I think that's because probably they don't have the testing available to confirm that, which actually means that everything that's in the stars, that you are made up of everything that is actually in the stars, that the components, the most pure elements in the universe that exist out there exist in you. And each and every one of us has that God self, that God quality, that spiritual stuff, okay, that makes that work. We all have that. Now we just have to recognize it and use it. I mean, if you knew that you were made of the stuff of stars, why wouldn't you shine your light? If you knew that this was what your life was meant to be, is to be a full expression of this infinite light, why would you settle for anything less? You got to ask yourself those questions. Next thing, please. Next slide. But because you're on the scale, you move from, yeah. So because we're somewhere in that between the amoeba and the stars, right? Because you're on that scale, we move from glory to glory. So let's call it glory to glory. I know that's a very old, it feels like a very old religious term to me, like something I would hear at my grandmother's Assembly of God church. But because of this, we are meant to move from glory to glory. We're meant to move from, where we are to something better. We are meant to evolve to a greater expression in our human experience. So we're not just meant to exist at the level of the amoebas or the cellular structure. We're meant to evolve and experience more of these things all the way up to whatever the stars are, right? We're meant to experience greater and greater things and move from glory to glory. Next slide, please. How are we doing? All right. Ascending scale of the artist. Before the picture is done, the next one is being planned. Authors are the same way. So let's talk about when you are planning your life, do you, like an artist who's painting a painting begins in their mind to start creating the next picture while they're painting this one. They're like, as a follow-up to this, right? Authors do the same thing. Creative people do the same thing. They have this, what they call the ascending scale of consciousness. So it's not enough just to get to one point. One has to think beyond those points so that the universal momentum, the spiritual momentum that takes you to point A will take you to point B, C, D, E, F, and G. So it continues to take you on. If you don't, then you reach a certain point where if you're not planning that ahead, if you're not looking ahead to your greater good, continuing to expand and express, if you don't have something else just in the hopper, in the spiritual concept of your mind, then it sort of stops there. And then we feel stagnant. Then we feel like we have to restart again. If we have the bigger pictures in mind, in other words, we have our next things in mind that we want to experience, the universe will experience its way right through the things in front of us onto the things that we really want to, or that we continue to want to experience. I hope that makes sense. All right, next one, please. Use your present aliveness and your present ideas and feelings to create your present world, but know your next idea to fulfill. That's what I just talked about. Use your present aliveness and your present ideas to live in the moment and feel good about the things you're creating, but always in the back of your mind, know there's someplace else you want to go. Now, make sure you're not in the plan B concept, but you're in the plan A. Okay, so always have the next idea to fulfill, not the fallback, but the forward movement. All right, don't plan the fallback. The fallback will, if you had to fall back, it actually is just a reset. If you have to fall back, it's just a fall. It's just motion. But to start planning and labeling it that way and thinking about, well, if this doesn't happen, then I'll settle for that. Then you're creating this duality that you don't want the universe to function in that. So use your present aliveness and your present ideas and that feeling for today and know what's beyond that for your happiness. Okay, next one, please. Let's see, Mary says, we are in the universe. The universe is in us. Absolutely. Totally agree. Totally agree. And mind is never static. David, you're absolutely right. David Flint, mind is never static. Some people think that mind can be static, but what they don't realize is that mind is never static. It's always growing and expanding. Now, whether you choose to move with it, that's another whole story. That's another whole story. That's power of choice. But the mind, God's infinite mind, is never static. I can create within myself a spiritual coma where I don't allow myself to go forward or back, or I just freeze. There's a freeze there. But that doesn't mean the universe isn't moving. It just means that I'm choosing not to. All right, next slide, please. Where are we? The mind never tries to maintain things as they are. It is finished with them as soon as they are completed. Think about that. As soon as something is demonstrated and in manifest form, all right? Whenever something is in manifest form, the universe is done with it. But it's really not, because it now becomes the next thing to work on, right? So it's never done with the way things are. Everything that is meant to continue to change and evolve. So what we think is, like David just said, what we think it looks stagnant, it's really not. It's the beginning of something else. It's the manifestation, but also the cause for the next thing, right? It's the effect, which is now the cause. So if you look at your life as a series of effects, which are now causes to create, then you will see how the pattern works. You'll know how this is working. But the mind is never wanting to maintain the way things are. The universe doesn't want to just maintain. It wants to expand and express, okay? And the only way to do that is to take what appears to be finished as the launching pad or the starting point for something else. All right, next one. How we doing? We doing well, everybody? God is always working on the next project. You have to do the same. It's your role. God is always working on the next thing in our life, and it's acting on the thoughts. When we wake up in the morning, the universe is acting on the thoughts that we have that day. That's its current project, and you have to do the same. You have to make sure that you're holding up that idea yourself so that it manifests for you that way. All right? Plain and simple. Go ahead. Next one. Fear, resentment, and other vicious attitudes hold fast the door against the inflow of spiritual impulses. So, getting back to what we talked about last week, fear, resentment, and other vicious, I love the way he says that, vicious attitudes. Boy, have we seen some of that? Boy, have we seen that this year. You know what? And I've never and maybe it's because of the way social media operates. I have never witnessed so much anger in people, and outright disrespect, and just it's been very shocking to me to see how human beings are treating other human beings. And what I know about that is this: when we do that, we stop the inflow of spiritual impulses to it just stops everything. It's like closing the door on your good. It just slams the door shut, and the universe can't open it up because there's so much negative energy holding the door closed. I don't know. I sit here as a spiritual leader and I think, how are we ever going to get to the point where we can heal the great divides that have been shown to us throughout the years, especially this past year? How will we get to the place where, the anger and the fear and that has gripped people's minds? It's going to take a lot of spiritual work, but I think it's going to require all of us to open up the spiritual doorway of our mind and take the fear and step back from it and open the door and walk through the door to something greater, and knowing that those spiritual impulses, the spiritual guidance will be there. All right. Next thing. Faith, vision, and right thinking unlock the door. Absolutely. That's what's going to move that door. That's what's going to do that. That's what's going to open that door for us. Now, I love that little graphic that we have there. Sometimes in our lives, we do this. Bring it on, bring it on, bring it on, bring it on. And then, we have a stop and the bring it on thing. We have we're sending two conflicting messages to the universe. So we have to make sure that we're always saying, bring it on, and taking that resistance out of there. I've been talking to myself. In fact, I talked to the staff last week at our last gathering. Because of the lockdown, we've had to stop meeting and stop taping at the center to comply with the CDC and the Southern California mandate. We've had to, we taped a bunch of things in advance, and I was very resistant that day. There were parts of me, like I felt like that coyote in the Looney Tunes, the coyote and the Roadrunner. Yeah, the Roadrunner and the coyote. And sometimes how the Roadrunner just puts its feet out and the dirt begins to pile up, and because it just pushes against it resists the movement. It's getting pulled along, and eventually it's covered in dirt from head to toe. I was beginning to feel like that last week because I was just resisting the flow of what was really happening around me. And I found it very difficult to work in that environment. I found it very difficult to recover from that feeling. And it's something I brought onto myself. It's that resistance. So many times we're doing this to the universe, and the universe doesn't know which one to respond to. So we've got to learn to put this one down and start going like this together, like bring it on. Because this doesn't get us anywhere. This just gets us buried in our own stuff. And it can, you'll feel like it's just on top of you and then some. All right, next one, please. Consciousness needs to be shaken up, cleaned out, and put in order as much as your house or office needs to have an occasional thorough cleaning. Well, okay, let's talk about that. We have to shake it up. One thing I think this year has really done is it has really shaken things up. It has. It has required us all to look deeply into what's important in our life, about how we prioritize things, about what's important, what's not. It's been a very interesting shakeup in consciousness. And it's been an opportunity to clean up some of the things that are going on. So continue to use this time of sheltering in, or whatever you call it, whatever we have to do. And it looks like it's going to happen for quite a few months before the things are going to be changing. So continue to use this opportunity to shake it up and clean it out. I know that even today, Trey and I were talking about what are we going to do today because we're locked in. And it's like, okay, well, let's go back to cleaning and organizing. You're like, okay, well, we just did that a couple months ago, but there's always more to do. So that's the goal today, is clean and organize. So just like you do your house, you have to do some spiritual cleaning as well. Next one, please. The possibility of improvement is in everything you do. You may be healthy, but you can be healthier. You may have a good income, but you can prosper more. So I love this idea. Listen to this. You may be healthy, but you can be healthier. Our teaching does not guarantee health. Our teaching does not guarantee prosperity. Our teaching doesn't guarantee anything, but it says you can experience more health, more prosperity, more loving relationships if you use these principles. It doesn't say it's given to you unconditionally. You have to work the principles. You have to do the work to get the result. It just doesn't given to you. It has to happen by means of you. So I like that idea. The improvement is always there. There's always something we can improve on. All right, next one. We're rolling. The present world, 1950s. Okay, this was written in 1950s. Offers you a super abundance. Never before in civilization has there been such an invention, right, of abundance. Now, it's funny that you say that because I went to the grocery store and there is not an abundance of paper towels or toilet paper or certain cleaning supplies. So the world has created superabundance, and then it's also created fear, which has required people to feel like they need to hoard, which means that the abundance that is ours to share is no longer available to share, but only a few people have it. So it seems to be a way of the world that right now. But there is this thing called in 1950s, and now we're in 2020, 70 years later. Think about superabundance. Think about all the things that have changed in the past 70 years about just the supply chain of things and what we have exposure to and what our life looks like. And just every part of it has so changed drastically in those 70 years, and it will continue to change. Who knows what's going to happen next? I'm excited to see how that plays out. Next one, please. Next week, the Divine Intangible continued. Okay, so next week, we're going to continue this conversation that we've been having, and we're going to talk about the Divine Intangible and how it works in business. How does God work in this business world? That's the next step, all right? So today we talked about how we reframe the idea of what God is, how we can change the way we look at it and continue to expand it and allow the old concepts to be released so the newer ideas can take hold in our life and expand. So that's what we did today. So I appreciate everybody logging in today. I appreciate those who commented. I very much appreciate that. I like to know people are out there. You never know when you're talking to a computer screen and you talk pretty much nonstop for close to an hour. You never know what's going on. So a couple things. To support the center, there is a link there where you could give where you're getting your spiritual food. Please continue to support us. There's going to be a special video coming out about our year end and what that looks like. We've got several programs continuing with you every day at 10 o'clock. Let me share with you some of the Sunday things that are going on. We have our regular Sunday services that we have pre-taped, but each one of them is unique in themselves with unique singers. And also we have done a virtual Candlelight service that will be shown on probably the 24th and 25th. We'll show those. All right. So we know that, and we have music by Levi Christ. He's going to be singing several songs for us in the Candlelight service. We can't meet in person, but we'll do this year the way that it's meant to be. So please continue to support us. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you for all the thank yous, everybody. Thank you. And have a great day. And tomorrow at 10 o'clock, continue to log in, all right? Have a wonderful Monday. Enjoy your day.